Well, I think we're going to get started. Meredith will continue to let people in as they pop in. I think they figured out I do those first couple slides so they don't have to rush to get in here. Good morning to everyone. Eileen Conley-Kiesler here, President and CEO of the Community Foundation of Collier County. We're so happy you were able to join us today. Today is the last of our 6 series, so we're excited to be through our process here. And we have an amazing panel for you today of people we work with all the time in a crisis situation in this county. So I'm going to ask you to keep your mics on mute during the presentation. You can chat in questions if things are coming to mind as people are talking. And at the end, again, we'll have people unmute so you can ask a question and we can have a conversation about what's going on. So today we're talking about crisis and disaster relief here in Collier County. And Laura's going to advance my slides. So, and again, what we see in the community is we play a really unique and essential role as a community convener. You know, we've earned the trust of nonprofits and governments, agencies, public and private foundations, and the corporate sector. So they really trust when the community foundation is bringing people together. We act as this community philanthropic first responder. So we, when we did our study around this particular campaign, people were talking about us stepping up whenever there was a crisis in the community. And I think as a community trusted foundation partner, really our financial stability brings peace of mind to people. And as you know, we did the needs assessment. We're getting ready next year to do the needs assessment again. So many of you will probably be being contacted about that. But in the needs assessment, there were things that came up specifically of areas that we needed to address. So Laura, you can hit the next one. In that process, we brought together 106 nonprofits to really look at what are the issues in this community we need to partner together on and we need to address in this community. Next. So out of that came what the Community Foundation decided we wanted to do to try to address what was happening in the community and decided to launch, first time ever, a $15.5 million campaign to really address 6 areas that we saw came to the top during that needs assessment. So the 6 areas are environment and accessibility, education and employment, crisis and disaster relief, seniors and veterans, housing and hunger, and mental health and substance abuse. So our challenges around crisis and disaster is, you know, there is during an immediate crisis like we've just been through with COVID, there's a disproportionate hurdle to get access to food, to healthcare, to financial support. Recent weather events, including the hurricanes, have really grown more dangerous, damaging, and more frequent. And you just seen what's going on across Texas and everywhere on these tornadoes this last week were quite shocking. And then again, with environmental change, you know, we're seeing that increase in red tide, algae blooms, and other water quality issues. So our solution is to raise 2.5 million. We've got 85,000 raised to date. You know, we want to have that money set aside. So whenever our crisis hits, we don't have to go out to try to raise money first in order to address it, that we have money in the bank that we can turn around and start addressing it. So we really want to generate the unrestricted funds for long-term needs. We want to invest in infrastructure and capital improvements when needed. We want to disperse to housing grants for home repairs and rebuilds again when needed, and respond to assist food pantries and small businesses in the event that that has to happen, because we've had to do it in the past. So we really feel these are some of the most important dollars we can have at the Community Foundation to be able to react immediately. So you'll see in the newspaper today when crisis strikes, if you get the newspaper, please pull that out and take a look at it. Otherwise, it is online and it certainly is on our website also, but it's an amazing paper that was put together around that. And so here's our panel today. Dan Summers, who's with the county, Carol O'Callahan, who's with Legal Aid, and Adria Starkey, who's president of Fine Mart Bank. And we are thrilled to have all 3 of you. And Dan, I guess you're starting today, so take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And let me just open up and just say this, that this public-private partnership is it's the best thing since sliced bread as it relates to disasters. And let's jump in with the next slide, and let me just kind of tell you, on the academic side of the house, we always think about preparedness, response, mitigation, and prevention and recovery. All of these things are in our wheelhouse as it relates to natural disaster, technological disaster, mass medical, acts of violence, and certainly public health emergencies goes without saying. We're the 48% of the 50-50 partnership associated with the COVID response. On what really happens, Collier County government is really good about, we can manage our infrastructure. That's a good thing. FEMA and Red Cross, Salvation Army have traditionally been there as it relates to disaster relief. But FEMA on its own has even said that the red tape associated with individual and family grants, even disaster recovery and mitigation funding, which is set aside for resiliency, a lot of that money goes unspent because it's so very, very complicated. It's hard money to spend, and it has a tremendous amount of oversight. In the human services area, which is always near and dear to my heart, is that the Pew study, FEMA's own study, FEMA's desire for emergency managers to engage in whole community response and recovery, the whole of a community, is part of our partnership with you all. And so it goes without saying that these disasters hit this demographic incredibly hard. And the Pew report is reporting, at least you put disasters on top of COVID, we've seen a 10-fold increase in things like post-traumatic stress, the depression, the financial hardships, things that you all in your human services world that you see every day. It's on our radar, but you guys are in the weeds with that, and we thank you for the hard work that you do. Let's go to the next slide. Our dialogue with the Community Foundation has just been phenomenal. Eileen, I can't thank you enough for your leadership. And we got together from lessons learned after Pulse nightclub. Then we started endorsing and really do endorse this single portal community funding. And the idea to get a fund set aside is phenomenal, because these are always fast-breaking events, whether it's a mass medical, mass violence. Our COVID response really was a fast-breaking event as we were managing and marshaling resources, if you will. And the thing that I like about this discussion is that I want to help build community resiliency. It's part of that whole community recovery. And the reason county government has big fund reserves set aside is just to be able to respond. And when you have reserve funds available, you can act quicker, you're much more efficient, and the recovery is faster. And then, of course, we get our community back to pre-disaster conditions. And to do it better, cheaper, faster is absolutely the way to go. We appreciate you all's engagement on the wildfires, these other smaller events, but have been important. And then certainly the transparency that you bring. So let's go to the next slide. I don't want to spend too much time on reliving history, but just to give you some order of magnitude here, Collier County had 72,000 folks registered with FEMA. That doesn't mean that all 72,000 got individual and family assistance. Those grants could have been anywhere from $1,300, probably up to around $21,000, depending on the potential impacts there. But even that has a lot of red tape with it. FEMA has to make a site visit. They have to make inspections, et cetera. $33 million was provided by FEMA for temporary housing and other client needs. And the whole temporary housing issue post-disaster is really tough. FEMA wants to try to avoid mobile homes and travel trailers, get into smaller grants for emergency repairs, and also looking at the hotels as an alternate to transitional sheltering assistance, which is a relatively new term this year. 10,000 families, rental assistance, 106 took refuge in hotels, and 39 families in housing such as apartments. And again, that's what we call TSA, Transitional Sheltering Assistance, which goes from the local evacuation shelter to some other mid-range housing solution. So let's go to the next slide. Our infrastructure, I won't spend much time on this, but Irma was unusual in that 99% of our commercial power was lost in Collier County, 22 days before we got 99% back, but still FPNL, Lead Co-op did a phenomenal job. 3.2 million cubic yards of vegetative debris, $120 million plus that we have spent on debris removal. We've gotten about 111 million of that back from FEMA. Now we're on the very hard projects, what we call hard projects for reimbursement. And just our protective actions alone in Collier County, we're close to 40 million. Let's go to the next slide. The 36th Ave wildfire events, we had two FEMA wildfire declared events. That was a massive resource rollout for us. Property loss, not a big number, but when you start thinking about some of these mobile homes, very, very substandard conditions, and trying to place those clients, and Salvation Army and others are still working today to try to work through those replacements and other housing solutions. And this is really tough, especially out in the estates area where these folks are simply not insured. The next slide. COVID, 376 days of our emergency operations center has been activated virtually. Our shop pushed out 1.4 million pieces of PPE. I referred to our team as Amazon West because we did a phenomenal job in moving material, and we had about 90,000 pieces in reserve, which really kept Collier County and 80 some agencies from being completely without product while the state and FEMA got product to us. The state, really no complaints. This is the largest expenditure our state EOC has ever processed. And I was able to acquire through our state resources 6 tractor trailer loads of meals ready to eat, bottled water, et cetera, even hand washing supplies that I've been able to push out intermittently to food banks to try to do some type of augmentation. I'm probably down to a pallet or 2 left, and that'll cycle that load, and then hopefully I can start building some inventory for the upcoming hurricane season. Next slide. Our partnership, one of the things that we kind of have a flashback here with COVID was that we've always had visibility in Immokalee. We've always had boots on the ground in Immokalee. It doesn't get a lot of attention necessarily, but I can assure you there's been a lot of hard work going on up there, and very sensitive, made the state keenly aware of the concerns we had in Immokalee early on in COVID. And the Community Foundation pulled a rabbit out of a hat for us. PPE was flying off the shelf. We found some. We were not able to go through the county purchasing process quickly enough, but negotiated a deal, a good price, a rock solid price. Eileen's team was able to place that order. We received it, got it out to Immokalee in a couple of days early on with some PPE kits. And I think every little bit helps in that. And we could not have moved that fast in government to acquire that PPE. And certainly the foundation came through for us. Our outreach was rock solid. Don't believe everything that you hear out there. Public health had educators on the ground. We had mobile billboards, constant interviews on low power radio stations, et cetera. Is there room for improvement? Always. But we worked hard in Immokalee, and I think part of our success there, this is not over, but our success to date has without a doubt been because of our partners. Our next slide. The partnerships, as I mentioned, were incredibly strong. I would have never thought that my office would be renting heavy equipment for supply delivery, which is what we did in Immokalee, coordinating the hand washing stations for migrant bus stops, the PPE and the other supplies that we have joined in on at certain days, the backpack fair, et cetera, we've been a partner with, and it's been great. And again, part of that has been a county effort and a state effort. The federal effort has certainly been at the 10,000 foot level with backup resources to the state. But it's if this integration between public and private is not there, it just doesn't, it's not very efficient. Next. I would have never thought that we would be writing instructions for hand washing stations. That was not in our plan, but you know, we relied on the fundamentals of public health associated during COVID. And then you see some of the PPE supplies that some that were donated, some of those in that particular batch came from the community foundation as well. So again, a very aggressive effort to address Immokalee in particular. Next. The CARES Act, this is more about what I know and don't know at this point. Our county human services, veteran and human services has the lead on the CARES Act. I know that there's been partnerships in distributing those funds. The last count, and this needs to be refreshed, this is about a week or two old, about 1,100 clients have received assistance. 316 businesses received assistance. And again, it's that partnership with the nonprofits who can move and do things a whole lot better, in my opinion. Our human services folks has a, you know, they've got their own set of requirements. The CARES Act money has been very difficult to process. There's an enormous amount of oversight in those grant funds through the clerk's office, but they've been getting the work done, and of course the phone rings. But again, just a great partnership in that particular process and getting money out the door within the CARES Act guidelines. Next slide. Couple of takeaways here real quick. I'm in my 33rd year of full-time professional emergency management, and I will just tell you, this is a team sport, and you have to have public-private engagement. You have to address it as a whole of community. We just don't, pick up debris. There are other things going on in the background, kind of managing and preparing to get those solutions ready during times of crisis. I really enjoy this discussion because as these agencies, these partner agencies go through these events, they automatically build resiliency. And I think the important thing here is don't leave these plans on the shelf in today's environment. And for organizations to build capability, to be able to move during disaster periods, to be able to turn on the lights and go to work just as soon as possible after one of these emergency events, figuratively speaking, and to get out there and serve, the whole community recovers faster. And the faster we recover, the quicker we get back to pre-disaster and stable conditions. And then finally, in my opinion, this is all about the local dollar. And when we can invest locally, turn that dollar locally, what was the old high school economics theory? $1 spent locally turns into $7 downrange locally. And so this local investment, it works, and it just makes a great deal of difference, not only for the disaster survivor, but for the community as a whole. So I just want to say thank you. Let us know what we can do to build more partnerships. Collier County is committed. I have a vacancy right now, but for the first time in 7 years, I now have an FTE dedicated full-time position dedicated to working with volunteer and nonprofit agencies in disaster resiliency and disaster recovery. And I'm in the process of filling that position right now so that our public-private partnership can be even stronger and work more closely on a day-to-day basis. So that's all I have, and thank you for this opportunity.
Next, I'd like to introduce Carol O'Callahan with Legal Aid of Collier County. Carol is the managing attorney. Welcome, Carol.
Carol, you're on mute.
I would be the one to do that, so sorry, but thank you. And thanks for inviting me to be here today. I just want to give a brief overview of what Legal Aid does on a daily basis. We provide free civil legal assistance to the most vulnerable members of our community to ensure their health, safety, and minimum economic security. So we have a number of units that work with the community, including our children's unit, which works with kids who are in foster care and dependency, or families who have children who've been abused or who've been neglected in some way, giving them the family law assistance they need to keep their children safe. We also represent kids who have special needs and may not be getting the services, the educational assistance they need. We also have a domestic violence unit where we work with victims of domestic violence, elder abuse, dating violence, repeat sexual assaults, and stalking for injunctions for protection and related family law matters. And the next slide. We have a community economic development unit, which is one of our newest units and one of our most exciting units because we help low to moderate income individuals start and establish their own businesses. And we're also acting in that unit as in-house counsel to a number of local nonprofits, especially those who are dealing with crisis as their in-house counsel, and so long as they're serving low to moderate income community members. We have a tax unit as well, where surprisingly our tax unit was the first unit to see the effects of the COVID pandemic. But we serve people in there who've been victims of identity theft, tax preparer fraud, or just have some sort of issue with the IRS. And we have an immigration unit where we deal with victims of crime and human trafficking, unaccompanied minors, asylum seekers, and working on family unification and citizenship matters. Next slide. That brings us to our housing and consumer law unit, which is the unit I wanted to spend most time on today. We deal with evictions, and at the moment, I'm sure you've all seen that evictions are skyrocketing. So what we have been doing is trying to keep people in their homes. We also deal with mobile home evictions, title foreclosures, title issues, foreclosures. At the moment, we're dealing with state and CDC moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures, dealing with defaults on reverse mortgages, just general debt issues, and disaster relief. Prior to Hurricane Irma and prior to any hurricane, we provide all of our staff with training on FEMA applications so that once the disaster hits, hopefully it doesn't, but once the disaster hits, our staff is ready to work with the public and get them the benefits they need, whether it's a FEMA application or emergency public benefits for food assistance. And then we also deal with contractor and repair issues in that unit. We have public benefits in general in that unit, and then we also have a gray light elder law project and a veterans project. So we can go to the next slide. So since the start of the pandemic, from August of 2020 to January of 2021, we saw a 365% increase in the number of evictions over the same time prior year. I mentioned the CDC moratorium, and that is a tool the CDC issued that should a family have been affected by COVID, so if they're financially affected by COVID, it allows them to stay in their home without being evicted. So that expires in just over 10 days. It expires on March 31st of this year. Maybe extended again, but it does expire on March 31st. So for the last 2 weeks, our numbers and eviction calls have, I want to say, doubled. We've been completely overrun with eviction matters. Consumer law issues, debt collection, lawsuits, garnishments. They were slow at the beginning of the pandemic, and they have unfortunately increased alarmingly at the moment as well. Between February of 2020 and January of 2021, we assisted 385 people in that unit, and that doesn't include their family members. So if somebody is married or has children, that number could easily triple or quadruple. We kept 52 families in safe and affordable housing. We were able to save 3 clients from foreclosure, and we secured over $1 million in economic benefits. So the next unit. And our partnership with the Community Foundation has been absolutely vital to the work we have been able to do for the community. Immediately after Hurricane Irma, Community Foundation was able to provide us with funding for an additional attorney to help with the housing issues. That attorney was also able to work with a number of people who had worked and not been paid, and who are facing contractor issues. And they continued that funding for a second round in March. So we had a year and a half of an attorney and a paralegal who were able to work with community members when it was most needed. And again, as soon as the COVID crisis struck, Community Foundation was right there for us. And they provided us with an attorney for a year. And in February, when our other funding was in doubt, they have stepped in and provided an additional grant to keep our entire unit in place through the end of this year. And right now, our highest demand, as I mentioned, is with evictions, with unemployment compensation, with consumer debt. They've also been gracious enough to provide general operating funds for our entire organization. And both the Women's Giving Circle and the Women's Foundation of Collier County have been very generous with their funds and with their assistance in the work we're doing. So next slide. So I wanted to mention some of the community partnerships we have. Right after Hurricane Irma hit, the Salvation Army offered us space in their disaster recovery assistance in both Naples and Immokalee, and that was vital for our attorneys and for our staff to be able to meet with clients. So where they were going through the Salvation Army to get their food and other supplies and other assistance, they were able to meet with us right then and there. They didn't have to go elsewhere to make an appointment and go through intake somewhere else. We were able to meet with them right on the site. We have had a very strong relationship with the Immokalee Unmet Needs Coalition as well out in Immokalee. While it was an informal group of agencies, we were participating in it. And shortly after Hurricane Irma hit, we were able to, our Community Economics Development Unit was able to represent them through incorporation and to become a nonprofit organization. So we were then able to help them set up affordable housing for 8 families so far. With the Naples Community Hospital, Hunger and Homeless Coalition, and other local agencies, we've been able to set up a referral process so that families who are facing eviction, families who, or even individuals in the hospital who are suffering from COVID, may be facing eviction because they haven't been in their home for 30 days. They're able to refer them directly to us, and it just speeds up the process so that we can keep them in their housing. Collier County Bar Association, just days after Irma, they had, I want to say 24 attorneys right here in our office for a free clinic. And that was when many of those attorneys didn't have any power in their home either. And Collier County provided us with with CARES Act funding. So during the fall, from September through December, we had 2 additional attorneys and 3 additional paralegals helping us with both small business issues and evictions. Next slide. And just a few of the stories that I tell, just to put a face on the work that we're doing and the work that the Community Foundation allows us to do. Mary was an 87-year-old woman who resided on her own during, I've told the story before, but it's typical of what we were seeing, so I like to tell it. She was 87 years old, she resided on her own, and she subsisted only on Social Security. And day after Hurricane Irma hit, there was a roofer at one of her neighbors' homes, and he tarped the neighbor's home and said to Mary, well, you know what, your roof is pretty badly damaged there. Why don't we at least put a tarp up there for you? She thanked him, allowed him to put the tarp up, and thankfully had the presence of mind to talk to another company. The other company came a few weeks later, took the tarp down, no damage at all. The roof was perfectly fine. But she still received a bill for over $2,000 for a tarp, for just a little piece of plastic on the roof. The roofing company refused to reconsider. They would not work with her at all, and they threatened to sue her. So she came to us, and we were able to get the debt totally erased. And $2,000 doesn't sound a lot, but when you're on Social Security, and that's the only money you get, it is life-changing. And it should not have happened in the first place, but we are very glad we were able to be there to help her. And the next slide. And Sarah and Andreas are people who came to us just in December, and they had received an eviction notice, came to us the day before they were supposed to be evicted. So our attorney just had one day to work on their case. They were on fixed incomes, and their income had been affected, obviously, by COVID, because they'd been doing cleaning and odd jobs around the neighborhood. So we instructed them, our attorney instructed them on how to file the CDC declaration, getting their landlord to understand that their income had been affected. And the landlord requested a court hearing to make sure that they were telling the truth. Unfortunately, before the hearing, they had a death in the family. So they missed that hearing, but we were finally able to get it settled. And when we were at the hearing, eventually the judge sort of encouraged the parties to talk to each other and to try and reach an agreement rather than having this family out on the streets. And we were able to do that, and we were able to get our clients to stay in the home until the end of March with no financial impact. The landlord was very satisfied because he had a resolution. He knows at the end of March that the apartment will revert to him. The judge was very grateful to our attorney because she didn't have to evict a family that really needed a place to stay. And our clients were absolutely ecstatic. They thought they were going to be out on the street, and they had an extra 2 months to find housing and to find stability. So our next one. And this is a case that kind of pans both crises or both disasters. Laura and Jeff are a married couple who resided in a home that was badly damaged during Hurricane Irma. And in late 2019, Rebuild Florida agrees to replace their mobile home. And unfortunately, in January, Jeff was hospitalized for major surgery. And while recovering, he contracted COVID. So he was hospitalized for several months. During this time, Rebuild Florida discovered that their home was not properly titled. So they came to us. If they didn't have a proper title, nothing could happen. They couldn't get the new home that they had been promised. So we were able to work with the family. We were able to get the home properly titled. We put in the legwork. We worked with the courts, and we got the home titled in Jeff and Laura's name. So they were able to get the replacement mobile home. And Jeff, who had, as I mentioned, had significant surgery and had been in the hospital for more than 7 months, was released to a safe and accessible home. There's a little letter down there, just a thank you from them. But I just wanted to thank the Community Foundation and the other agencies that we work with, because without your support, without you being able to step in as quickly as you have after both disasters, we would not be able to do this work. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We appreciate all of your hard work. Now I'd like to introduce Adria Starkey, the president for Collier County with Finemark Bank. Adria, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. And a really special thank you to Dan and Carol, because I haven't heard your stories before, and it was great for me to hear as well. As a corporate employee, somebody who's been living in Collier County for more than 32 years and always working for companies, I find that most of the businesses in Collier County really do want to support this wonderful community that we have the pleasure of working in. And at Finemark, our vision, we have a vision statement, and it is really to make a positive impact on the individuals, the families, and the communities we serve, while being good stewards of Finemark's resources. So, in my job, I have to take care of my people that work here, my clients, and then I start thinking, okay, I need to give back to our community. But as you can certainly know, during the last year, during Irma, these were times where we really were busy taking care of our own. And then how do we help this greater community? And for me, it's really about being efficient with my time. And I've been able to develop an amazing partnership with the Community Foundation. I've been involved with a number of charities, so I feel I know best in class charities in this community. But at the same time, I've been involved with so many of them that I would almost feel guilty picking one charity over another. So I let Eileen be my guide. And I call and say, Eileen, what do? I want to give back. And FindMark, we give to every community that we do business in, and usually at the same times. But I go to the Community Foundation because I know they will know where I can make the best, most significant impact and make a difference, truly make a difference in people's lives. And the Community Foundation has turned into a huge collaborator in our community and bringing together all of those best-in-class charities and organizations so they can have the impact that they are currently having. I think our relationship really started in a more significant way during Hurricane Irma because Eileen came to us asking if we would make gift cards. And when she first said it, I said, of course, but there were a lot of gift cards. And so every one of our offices throughout Southwest Florida, people were working late and creating gift cards, and I would bring stacks and stacks of gift cards to her, funded and ready to go so they could distribute them into the community. And we did that again recently to help with some of the hunger issues, as well as paying utility bills and things like that that you've heard about. I also call the Community Foundation when, okay, we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to help healthcare workers. She suggested I go through the Salvation Army. And this year, every one of our employees made personal donations. We usually support families in need during the holidays. And this year we went through the Salvation Army and helped people pay their rent, helped people pay utilities, and do things that Salvation Army guided us to do, but with very specific families, because I wanted my employees to feel like they were actually touching other families and making a difference during the holidays. I have just found that working with the Community Foundation is an easy, and I know that we're spending our money in the best way possible. And that's how I can be a good steward of FindMark's money. As I was sitting here, I thought the past 2 days I've been during season, and I've been doing a lot of education, primarily of women and financial matters. And one of the things, the first thing I suggest is that you should always have a cash stash. 3 to 24 months of your living expenses should be put aside in a cash stash just for that rainy day, just in case. So you never need to sell securities in a down market. You've got cash to get you through. And so I look at this fund that the Community Foundation is now trying to establish. This is the cash stash that we desperately need in our community, because it's not if, it's really when the next the next disaster strikes. We know it's going to happen. We just need to be prepared. And so I think it is of vital importance that the community come and support what the Community Foundation is trying to do and build these funds and resources. So I have found this to be of utmost benefit. I would strongly recommend other business owners or individuals feel comfortable going to the Community Foundation. To me, it's about expediting my time and my resources in the best way possible. And I have to do the best I can, because it's not just the community, but also all the people I have to serve internally, as well as my own family. So to me, this is a huge time saver, and they do a fantastic job. So thank you. Thank you to the Community Foundation for all you do for us.
Thank you, Adria. One thing you didn't mention on these gift cards is FindMart waived all the activation fees. And when, you know, and it's, I don't know, $5 or whatever it is, an activation fee, but we are talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gift cards they did for us. I remember Adria coming into the office one day with this briefcase, you know, and she's like, I have $150,000 I'm carrying in this briefcase and gift cards that are now, that were activated. You know, she said, you got to kind of think about that when you're walking around town with this. So came into the office and dropped it off. So we thank you so much because we know there was a financial impact and we know there was a labor impact on Fine Mart as we were all trying to deal with Irma and everything that had happened that week. But we were able to get those cards in our hands very quickly. I mean, 24 hours, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cards. So I just want to
Thank you. It was our pleasure. And I do think that the people that stayed late making gift cards all night had a good time doing it as well. Felt that they were giving back. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely were. So we're going to open it up for questions. Laura's going to do, I know there's one in the chat. And, but, you know, take it off mute. You want to have a discussion. That's great. And I'm going to start off. I was writing questions as people were talking, but Dan, I have a couple questions for you. But before I ask that, I just want you to know that our board of trustees at the Community Foundation after Irma, you know, really understood the impact we have on having to move quickly and have purchased an extremely large generator that can take care of our offices, probably this entire building if we really needed it to. And also we have a dish put in now that we can switch over. So in the event we lose our power, another hurricane comes through, we are going to not lose any time this year. I mean, last time we were running around with cell phones trying to find, you know, a place that we could call. And this time we are well prepared for, I think, any crisis that could hit. So, you know, thank you to our board. But Dan, I just wanted to ask a couple questions. One, the county ran into issues also not having enough generators or things that were kind of going down. And part of the sales tax, I believe the 1% sales tax was to help the county kind of get in a better position for this time. And so that has happened, I assume, and that things have been replaced, generators and things have been replaced.
Well, let's put it this way. The process has started. Just to put it in perspective, there are over 450 pump stations in Collier County. That's for potable water and wastewater. The average generator that you put just in the neighborhood pump station is around $100,000 a piece. And that's something that, you know, without outside grants or the surtax would fall upon the ratepayer and it would be unbearable. So it is a process. We're talking a 3 to 4 year design, construction, install. So I know that through our FEMA mitigation grant, that's a kind of the broker, we're the broker for that. I think we've got about 26 generators that have been approved by FEMA, about $4.5 million. There is a local match with that. So that's 75% federal, 25% local. The surtax also has a number of capital projects. Wastewater is included in that. Other mitigation efforts across the county, and the list is long. One, I will tell you what I think is a success story. You know, during Irma, we moved 63 tractor trailer loads of commodities through the Emergency Services Center here in just a carport. And what we found, we were losing commodity to wind and rain and temperature extremes, not wind, but rain and windblown rain, and our covered parking getting wet. One of our surcharge projects here is to enclose some of our covered parking into a dedicated disaster supply warehouse. And we're in design right now. That'll give us 22,000 square feet under air just to have disaster commodity on hand. And not only is that convenient, and we're prepared to do all the logistics of lifting and moving, but what we can also do now is that we can make purchases under blue sky, which means those prices are far more competitive. The freight is lower, freight costs are lower. As an example, when you buy under what we call gray skies or storm conditions, the price is astronomical, of course. So lots and lots of projects, probably 35 different projects going on across the county. But again, best value has to be properly bid, FEMA procurement, dare I say, FEMA red tape, and then even the demand for things like generators nationwide. You really just have to wait your turn. Can't buy any of this off the shelf. So it's a multi-year process, but it's going well.
Okay, let me ask one, as long as you're talking about FEMA, and then I'll let Laura ask the question that was in the chat. But correct me if I'm wrong, and because I might be wrong about this, but I remember after Irma, Everglades City really took a hit. For those of you who did not see it, it was devastating. And part of the money that we raised through our fund went to help put many of these houses on stilts, so that they're in a better position this next time. But how is FEMA feeling if another hurricane hits Everglades City? Will they be there? Because I heard some rumor at one point that they were saying people shouldn't be living here and we're not going to necessarily keep coming back here. So what's the stance on that?
Well, it's worrisome. Here's what the FEMA rules are generally like this. It's kind of the 3 strikes and you're out. It comes back to repetitive flood loss, and flood loss in this case is storm surge inundation. And so FEMA is only there's going to be a limited number of times that FEMA is going to pay a flood claim if they have flood insurance. Then if it starts doing, that's for the individual homeowner. Then FEMA is also going to say, okay, what's going on with water and sewer systems, infrastructure, governmental buildings, and there'll become a point in repetitive loss where FEMA says no more. And then that's really going to be devastating for a community if they have not taken mitigation measures in order to elevate or become more flood resilient. So, and then again, the other part of this is that Everglades City is, as you know, that was the original county seat for Collier County. There might be a lot of emotion tied to those political concerns related to regulatory requirements, if you will. So we'll have to see, but there's no kidding around anymore about repetitive flood loss, and FEMA has no sympathy if they've made more than 1 or 2 flood claims in there, that there's a provision most likely where they're not going to pay anymore. And then the question is, can the community afford that?
Well, hopefully that 1% sales tax, I know there was discussion about the sewage issues and them using some of that money to try to address what's going on there. So I don't know if that will happen, if it has happened.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that they were, the last look-see that I am aware of was outside of our domain was the U.S. Department of Ag, which also has some flood and disaster relief programs. There was some look at Everglades City for building the water and sewer system there as being more resilient, but that is out of our wheelhouse because it's at USDA.
Okay, thanks.
But that's the last I've heard.
Okay, Laura?
Let's see. So we have one question from the audience for Carol at Legal Aid. Carol, you said the eviction moratorium expires in 10 days. I thought the recently passed American Rescue Plan Act extended the moratorium. Can you please clarify?
That act extends the moratorium on federal foreclosures. So it's not an eviction ban. It's a moratorium on the foreclosures for federally backed properties. So some states have indeed extended their moratoriums through the end of June. I think New York has, Oregon has extended it for a few months, but right now most of the rest of the country, it's a March 31st. Now that moratorium has been extended, I think about 5 times at this stage on the eve of the expiration. So that is a possibility, but right now it still stands as a March 31st, it expires.
Thank you, Carol. I don't see any other questions. We welcome questions. I know that a lot of this discussion has included Hurricane Irma, and I'm sure that the audience has a lot of questions about COVID and COVID relief. We at the Community Foundation have worked closely with the county on handling from August through December, $5.5 million in CARES Act funding for our food banks and food pantries. And now we're set to handle another 5 million. We're happy to answer any questions about that, or we welcome questions for any of our presenters.
Errol, how large is your staff and what is your annual budget?
Our staff here in Collier County, we have 39, I believe. We've got a couple of open positions at the moment, but we do have 39 people on staff, including 2 that are based in, that are split between our Naples office and our Broward County office. And our budget is 1.9 million a year.
And where does that funding come from, Carol?
Well, from you guys, from the community,
Yeah.
from
I wasn't
NC,
setting you up to say that. I was just-
yeah, from you guys, from the NCF, the founders of the Winter Wine Festival. They fund our children's unit, and in our children's unit we have 9 people employed. So we've got 8 and a half people, 5.5 attorneys and 4 paralegals who work with the kids of Collier County. And our domestic violence unit, we have another 5 people, and that's funded by a community block development grant, which comes from HUD through the county, and also VOCA funding, Victims of Crime Act funding. We get funding from the Southwest Florida Community Foundation for our immigration project, as well as VOCA as well. And we have a number of smaller grants that help fund our housing and consumer law unit. We get a grant from the IRS to fund our tax program. We also receive, we call it filing fees, but it's statutory fees that come from the county to fund legal aids, and then fundraising. And as you can imagine, this year our fundraising efforts have been very much hamstrung, which is why we are so incredibly grateful to the Community Foundation for stepping in and making sure our housing and community housing consumer law project is fully funded through the end of the year. I know I'm missing other funders, but those are the bigger funders. United Way as well. I'm sorry, you do get.
So basically, I mean, you are doing what every other nonprofit's doing. I think many times people think legal aid is funded by the state somehow and kind of taken care of, and they really do not understand that you operate like every nonprofit who's out there trying to raise dollars, because it's not just coming in and county or state or federal money. So
exactly, we have to raise that $2 million every year in order to keep our doors open and keep our staff in place.
Right.
We have a question from the audience. If someone, this is probably for you, Eileen.
Yeah.
If someone wants to make a specific contribution to the Crisis and Disaster Fund, how should the check be written?
It could just be written out to the Community Foundation, and in the memo, put disaster fund, and we will make sure it gets put into this account. You know, I just can't stress how important this is, because again, when these crises hit, you know, when Irma hit, we had the website up that Friday before it hit, and we started to collect money, but it took me calling people on Monday after Irma came through, you know, and then I had to get their checks, and then we had to get it in the bank, and then I had to write checks to Harry Chapin to get food and water brought in. I mean, we got that done in 48 hours, but we still wasted 48 hours. I could have moved a lot quicker had I had the money in the bank. We could have cut those checks, and I could have driven it over to Fort Myers, you know, at least a day earlier, if not more than that. So, and even with COVID, I am shocked we were able to raise, you know, the 1.6 we've raised, because with Irma, money comes from all over. When a hurricane hits, you do get money from all over the country and beyond, where people are seeing Florida's getting attacked, and so they're there to help us. With COVID, everybody got the attack, and so we really had no idea what we were going to be able to raise. Our board immediately put a total of $250,000 into the fund on the day before we closed a year ago, so we could start to function, because we have some unrestricted dollars, and it was so important because, again, we had no idea where this money was going to come from, but donors, as usual, in Collier County stepped up. The key is to get us in a better position so we can move quicker. And you know, we appreciate anything anybody can do to help us in that area. And 2.5 million would really set us in a nice position for whatever the next crisis is. It's been going to be, in September, 4 years since Irma. I don't know, Dan, any predictions on the hurricane season, but sooner or later it's coming again. We know this.
Well, I don't like being a government bureaucrat, but I'll tell you, I did not reprint any permit forms, any hurricane permit forms in Collier County this year, trying to discourage it. But, I just want to mention too, that what's so unique now, I mean, you've got, you all have got such a great base put together here. And I think the other message here is that we know that all of these systems in our community are stressed. And that's from our food bank and our legal aid and those type of things. And, we can only hope and pray we don't have any storm events this year. But, we can't do that. As we like to say, hope is not a planning strategy. So digging in, working just as hard, in all of our preparedness activities, all of your preparedness activities, that means identifying and having the resources available. And we're going to have to run 2 disaster events this fall, which is really COVID and the storm, or COVID and the wildfire, which again means it's going to place an additional burden on all of us as a whole community. So the more we can put in that reserve, that cash stash, I'd like to borrow that term a little bit, but the cash stash in these reserves are so important because, again, I think timeliness and the reaction after these events is just so important.
Right.
Thank you, Dan. We have about 2 minutes left and maybe time to answer this one final question. It's again, I believe, for Eileen. Please explain how these fund monies will be spent. Will they all be spent? Will some be endowed? If spent, over what time period?
Yeah, I mean, we will not endow these dollars. I would love someday to have millions of dollars endowed for disaster where we don't have to touch the principal. But the point of this fund is to get the 2.5 million in cash so that we can move. Will it all be spent at one time? Unknown. Depends on what the crisis is. Anybody who works with me knows I hate to spend anything down. I'd like to make sure we always have money for the future. And if we look at the last disasters, Irma, we raised about 2.2 million, COVID about 1.6. So, to have that 2.5 million puts us probably in a really good position around a crisis. And again, even if the 2.5 is in the bank, it isn't that we're going to stop raising money. We're still going to raise money. It's just not going to be as crucial, because of the time delay of mailing me a check and me having to deposit the check, then me having to write a check. So, Jen, if it's a big enough crisis, yes, all of it would be spent. If we can hold on to some of it, continue to raise money, we will definitely be doing that too. But the point to have it is when the crisis hits, whatever it is. When you look at housing, I mean, 60,000 a house to raise a house, that you can blow through a lot of money really quickly in a hurricane. So.
And Eileen, isn't another way to look at this, it's really immediate unmet needs. If I had to say that there's a cloud out there that this is under, the bubble, if you will, the terminology is immediate unmet needs.
Right.
And there are big gaps between what FEMA disaster relief can do. There are gaps in terms of financial gaps. There's more importantly, huge delays in many cases in FEMA assistance, as well as others. So I think where I see this is so valuable, it's quick, it's immediate, and then it allows these other resources, if they're available, to kick in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Ashley's still on. Obviously, Salvation Army was a huge partner with us and could move very quickly with us. It took FEMA a little time to get here, I think. It's not like they're, sitting outside the county waiting for Irma to leave so they can roll in. We all have to survive that first few days without the federal government rolling in here. So important, very important. I think of all the 6 areas we're raising, this definitely is one of the most important areas. They're all important for different reasons, but because of the crisis side of this and that needing to move so quickly, I really feel like this is one we have to seriously raise the money for. So,
well, thank
any
you.
other questions?
Yeah, any more questions? We're just a little over time.
We're gonna let people get back to their days, but we thank you so much for joining us. And if you have questions, feel free to get a hold of any of the staff. We're happy to answer anything that might come to your mind after you hang up from this call, or any other needs around philanthropy. You know, we're here for you. So thanks again to the panel, Dan, Carol, Adria, really appreciate your time today. So
Thank you.
have a good weekend. It's Friday.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.